What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some news about the upcoming Gothic Remake, specifically its release date alongside some interesting gameplay details that have been released over the past few days via some essentially devlogs and a recent trailer. Now, I don't want to bury the lead here, so we'll go ahead and jump in with, I would argue, the most important bit, which is that we do have an official release date for the Gothic Remake now, which is going to be June 5th. And while I suppose you could argue that is technically a delay, the game never had a set-in-stone release date, but they were initially targeting early 2026, and it looks like that got moved out to Q2 at some point, and now we have the June 5th release date. But while that is interesting news in and of itself, it also just gives me a convenient excuse to talk about these other gameplay details, because alongside all of this information, if you've been following the THQ Nordic Inside YouTube page, they've been dropping some dev diaries for some of this stuff as well, which is where we got to look at some of these extra systems. Namely things like the hints of the new armor system, as well as some environmental interactions. Now, the new armor system in particular was of great news to me because if you've played the original Gothic, you likely know that the armor system there was very, very linear. There were some variations based on which factions you joined, yes, but for the most part there was a very clear progression based on, at most, whether or not you wanted to be like a magic user versus a more traditional combat-oriented type of hero. Here, however, we see a bit of like an armor additions system. So they talk about in this dev diary how their initial idea for this was to simply add variations of the different faction armors in order to make the individual characters of the three faction hubs feel more unique and interesting. That way they didn't all just kind of look the same. In so doing, however, they eventually came to the realization that they could just open up this system to the player as well, allowing you to make alterations to your armor. So just like before, you'll get your sort of base armor set when you join up with a faction. However, after that, you'll be able to take it to an NPC who can then alter it, which will affect the stats of it and also change what it looks like visually. And my hope is, if they lean fully into this, it will help break up some of the monotony of the linear armor progression of the original game, which was more of a product of its time than like a specific downfall of that game or anything. Now, on top of that, they also showed off some different ways you could use things like magic with environmental interaction, showing you like being able to freeze water with some of the water mage abilities, stuff like that. And while the original Gothic 1 also had some fun ways you could interact with magic already, it does seem like they're really wanting to hone in on that stuff and make the open world of Gothic 1 even more open and interesting to explore. Which is why another dev diary they did, talking about the lighting and the mood of the game, was really great to me because it seems like they definitely get the vibe of that original game. Having played it myself for the first time just a few years ago, one of the things that really stood out to me on my first playthrough of that game was how, despite the graphics being what they were, that game had just like this incredible mood to it, like walking through the various forests of the game, things like that. Even all the way back then, there was a very specific vibe it gave off, and they at least seem to be aware of that in the things that they are trying to do, which is why it's front of their mind as they start adding more things like dynamic weather systems, storms and stuff that actually affect the frequency of the waves in the surrounding bodies of water, the way the moonlight shines through the forests, things like that. And it seems to me that they, again, at least understand that principle that was clear to me when I played the game for the first time myself. And yet, in spite of all of that, it's difficult to get people to play the original Gothic these days, but I do think it is a game worth playing, which is actually the main reason I'm so excited about this remake in particular, because I think it's going to offer people a much more modern, by comparison at least, chance to get into a series that I think is really great, and especially the first one actually, which is why I want to add some more information towards the end of this video here that is stuff that is already known for the most part, but I think people watching this might find useful. So one of the key things that would keep you from playing the original Gothic these days is some of the setup. You'd likely have to install mods to get it to even run, but on top of that, the control scheme is very different from what you would probably deal with today. I think if you mess around with it long enough, it gets to a point where it feels more natural than you might expect, but when you first jump into it, it's gonna turn you away almost immediately, I would bet. And while the remake does aim to, clean a lot of that stuff up and introduce this to new players, I do think it's important that people who try out this game or want to try it out also understand that the fundamental Gothic experience is still you entering a new, unfamiliar place, very weak, very easily destroyed, and through hard work and perseverance, building your character up, and then slowly earning the success that you actually get, getting better and better at combat as you fight for those early levels and stuff, and then eventually, through that effort, becoming the killing machine you were always meant to be. And I wanted to preface this next part with that because you can try out the Gothic Remake systems, at least in part, via the publicly available Nyrus Prologue demo. It's important to understand also that the Nyrus Prologue puts you in the role of a side character who you'll interact with later, but is not actually the nameless hero who you will be playing as a set character for this game. But through that demo, you can get an idea of how the game plays and everything, alongside the way you're going to have to fight for some of that early progression before building yourself up. But that said, the game also will not be a one-for-one recreation of the original either, because as you could probably tell from some of that early information, they are looking to change a few things here and there. In particular, they specifically mention expanding upon and adding more detail to some of the quest lines. Now, I think probably the easiest place off the top of my head to do exactly that would likely be with the faction storylines. That is to say, give them more of one or faction-specific content even, because, as is the case with honestly most of Piranha Bytes' work before they got shut down, while you do wind up joining a faction, there really isn't that much unique content associated with it specifically. Like, you'll see, I would say probably like 90% of the game, regardless of which faction you choose in terms of content and stuff, because there was only like one or two quests really locked behind that stuff anyway, and most of the work for those factions was doing the work it takes to join them. And so if they wanted to expand upon those quest lines, I think that would be like an easy place to start, would to just be add some faction specific stuff in there. They've also already mentioned that they are expanding upon some other areas of the game as well. So a really cool thing about Gothic is that all the way back in 2000, a couple years before Morrowind even, they essentially made a little sandbox there. NPCs have routines and things they get up to, and there's a surprising amount of reactivity even for as old as that game is, and you can expect that to still be there in the remake and be something you can engage with, and combined with the expanded systems elsewhere, leaves this remake open to a lot of potential. And I am also curious about how they're going to scale the world, because they also mention the addition of some specific traversal abilities. So one of the chief ways you could get around in the original game was teleport spells that you would find throughout, but they seem to be implying here that they've added some stuff on top of that, which again, to me personally is quite intriguing as to what they actually did there. But then the modernized combat and controls will also be at the top of the things they're expanding upon, and we can actually see some of that via the new gameplay that I've had almost certainly looping in the background here. But putting all of that together, Gothic Remake got a lot of very good news recently, and I am genuinely looking forward to playing it come June, and hopefully you'll be around to listen to that video as well, and ideally experience the game for yourself, as I really do think that game is worth experiencing if you really love RPGs. But as for today, I do think that is pretty much going to wrap it up. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. Let me know how you feel about this down in the comment section below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.